Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for spending time and being here. I know it's very late in the afternoon, and probably you are all tired. So let's get started. I am honored to present you today 3.5 years of building our Kubernetes platform, lessons learned along the way. But maybe first a bit about myself. Who am I? I am Maryam. I'm a cloud engineer at RELEX Solutions. I am based in Finland, Helsinki. In my free time, I sometimes write some technical articles about like cloud and Kubernetes in my Medium account. And recently, I've been helping organizing CNCF meetups in Finland, Helsinki. So if you ever came to Finland, we would be happy to have you in one of our meetups. Don't come in winter, it's too cold. But only if you enjoy some winter sports. Anyway, here is my LinkedIn and Medium account. I would be happy to get to know you and be in touch. Maybe a bit about my company, RELEX Solutions. It's a supply chain and retail planning platform that helps retailers unify their planning from demand and merchandise to supply chain and operations. Here's the agenda that we're going to have for today. First, I'll go through project timeline and history. Then I'll talk about project structure and architecture. Then we can take a look at some statistics about usage of the platform within RELEX. After that, we can dive into the lessons that we learned during building this platform. And finally, I'll shortly mention some of our future plans. So, project timeline and history. Let us start from 2019, when the project was born. The project was initially created for one of the internal development teams that were willing to migrate their workload to Kubernetes. As of cloud providers, the Azure was already chosen by management due to other reasons not relevant to Kubernetes service, so it was an obvious choice for the team at that time to go with Azure Kubernetes service. A few consultants were hired to create this project, and the project ultimately was born at the end of October 2019. 2020, the project was changed to be a unified Kubernetes platform within the company. In January, I joined initially as a site reliability engineer to one of the development teams. In March, there were already 5 different development teams that started using our platform, and my team was one of those. In April, there was one internal employee who joined the team. Until then, there were only consultants making the project. And then in October, we had a big, massive merge request related to migration of service principals to Azure Managed Service Identity, which unfortunately became a major incident, and a revert of change was applied within 2 days. Also, a second internal employee joined the team at the same time, and also one of the development teams decided to leave the project as the result of the major incident, unfortunately. So 2020 overview is that it was decided to change the scope of project from a team infra platform to a company-based Kubernetes project. There were so many repeated configuration files for different teams and their environments that it was decided to let's use TrackRun, which is a Terraform wrapper, and helps you to keep your code dry when using multiple Terraform modules. 2021, the team grows. In February, there were 5 different development teams and 14 different environments, like dev, test, production, that were using the platform. In March, I joined the cloud team to work on this project, and also tests were added to the project, robot framework tests were added, and then in April, we had semantic versioning. Until then, there was no versioning, so changes of the Kubernetes platform were deployed to user teams' environments from master branch. So you can imagine that all the teams needed to deploy the changes approximately at the same time, so that master branch was released and we could continue our development work. Also, resource tags became mandatory at that time, and we added a start-stop automation for our development clusters because there was no reason in having those development clusters turning on all the day, and in order to decrease the costs. In October, second try to merge the changes for managed identity happened, and hopefully this time it was successful. And in November, security patching was standardized, and it included, for example, Helm chart upgrades, provider upgrades, and Terraform background upgrades. Also, full access privileges for developers was dropped, and instead access packages started to be in use, and the rights were given accordingly to those access packages. So 2021 overview is that project grew. As the project grew and more teams were willing to use the project, a team started to form around this project, and we had 3 internal members for the team by the end of that year. And then 2022 project gets more mature. In January, we started having a release blog post where we were explaining what are the features, what are the bugs in this release, and some instructions for our users, how to deploy changes. Then in February, we started migrating environments configurations, like development teams environment configurations, to a separated repo. Until then, the core code of platform was at the same place as environment configuration, and it was a hassle. The access rights was challenging and other things. And then in March, the deployer service principles, the service principles that are in use for deploying changes of the platform on top of development teams' environments. Those SPs had too high rights over everything, all non-prod and prod. So we thought it's not secure, so we made segregation over those service principles and their rights. And then in July, we had 3 new permanent members, which was a cool thing. Our team grew. And in August, we changed our release strategy to be a 1-month release cycle instead of 2 weeks, since our users were complaining that 2 weeks is a short time and they couldn't keep the pace. And then in September, we had sort of a major incident, but just for one test environment and one of the development teams. The problem was that one of Azure created resource groups was deleted by a user from Azure portal. So in response to that, we thought we have to add resource logs for all the resources that are created via platform. And in November, again, in order to decrease our costs, we introduced a start-stop automation for our development teams so they can stop their test and dev clusters during non-working hours. So we could decrease costs in that way as well. 2022 overview is that project became more mature and people joined the team and left the team and until it became a permanent 6 members by end of that year. Then 2023 was time for supporting features. In April, feature testing process changed. Until then, we were only testing continuous deployment, meaning that just testing the changes on top of master branch, but we thought we also need to change each version, changes that are coming in this version compared to the previous version, all at the same time. So we added that also as part of our automated testing. Then in May, we had fully automated deployments, meaning that until then, there were some manual steps that our users needed to do. For example, a Helm upgrade, a Helm uninstall command might have been needed, or a Terraform import or delete a resource. But it was a hard thing for our users to do as manual steps before the actual deployment via pipeline. So we also added those to a script that could be run before the actual deployment pipeline. Also in May, we added a feature request by our users about service mesh. We did investigation and we came up with Linkerd as the right solution for our use case. And then in June, we also had another feature request by our users about having a shared cluster, a cluster that development teams can just come and deploy their applications. They don't care about maintaining the cluster, and the deployments could be isolated based on namespace. So that was also a feature that we started and is under development. So 2023 overview is that we had enough time to add supporting features based on different teams' requirements. And now we can take a look at project structure and architecture. Here you see a high-level architecture of the platform. There is Azure Kubernetes service in the middle of an Azure subscription. We have other Azure resources such as container registry, Key Vault, and Postgres database. Then for deployment of the actual components within each cluster, as part of a standard components, we use Helm charts. And we have, for example, Nginx Ingress, which is responsible for exposing Kubernetes services to public or private network. Then Ingress controller is linked to an Azure load balancer, which gets a private or public IP at the end. We use Cert Manager, which is a certificate management controller for Kubernetes. It observes creation of new Ingress resources, and based on the TLS specifications in the Ingress object, it creates certificates, and it uses by default Let's Encrypt for creating certificates. And then in this architecture, we have a DNS zone for each cluster. So we have external DNS, which observes creation of new Ingress resources, and it creates a record for each newly Ingress resource, which is created via the zone, inside the zone, which is for that cluster. We have other components, such as Datadog for collecting logs, Prometheus for collecting metrics. Then we send these metrics to visualize those metrics in Grafana dashboards via the centralized monitoring solution that we have in company. We use AKV to Kubernetes, which is the project for syncing secrets from Azure Key Vault to Kubernetes secrets. And ultimately, we use Keyord, which is Kubernetes reboot daemon. It's a Kubernetes daemon set that does the automatic and safe reboot of the nodes whenever it's necessary and is specified by package management of the node. Now let's take a look at the statistics of usage of our platform within the company. We have, at the moment, 13 different development teams which are using this platform, from which 47 are production and 33 are non-production. And we have 22 mandatory Terraform service modules, which are creating the components that I already mentioned, like Cert Manager, Ingress Controller, and so on. Then we have 42 optional service modules creating feature requests that our users have, for example, Linkerd, Postgres database, MySQL, so on. And yeah, that was some statistics. Now we can dive into the lessons that we learned during building this platform. I want to emphasize on the major incident that I mentioned in the beginning first, and lessons that we learned from that. First thing is that it was a really massive merge request. It included changes for the migration of service principals, as well as some changes for Cert Manager, Ingress Controller, and so on. So don't do that. Don't create merge requests that are heavy, and it's hard to review those. Also, we didn't have proper automated testing at that moment, and also the manual testing was not extensive enough to cover the change that was introduced. As well as we didn't have any rollback plan, so no push button for rollback. And plan was overconfident, and no one thought that it might go wrong. And ultimately, deployment procedure had limitations. As I mentioned earlier, we were deploying changes from master branch, and we were even automatically deploying changes as soon as the change was merged to all development environments of all the teams. So you can imagine that all their development environments were in failing state after that change was merged. Other aspects, apart from that major incident, first lesson is that having an internal team is really important. It's not enough to have some consultants. Knowledge sharing cannot happen. If it's going to be used among different teams in the company and it's going to be a big project, then you need a proper team around it. Second lesson is standardization. Our users are development teams, and DevOps knowledge might be missing in some of the development teams. So it's important that we standardize our procedures so that our users know what are the procedures. And it helps them to understand how a platform works better. The next item is somehow relevant, having proper documentation for our users, adding blog posts, release blog posts helped. We could explain what are the features, the bugs, and the instructions for our users to deploy the changes that were coming in each release. And also we introduced some best practices documentation about usage of platform. And yeah, knowledge sharing could happen much easier during having this sort of documentation. Next item is preventing incidents in any way which is possible. For example, having resource logs on all the resources that you are creating via your platform, and setting soft delete policies and backup options as much as is possible. Next is cost optimization. You can think of this from day one, setting tags for each resource so you can manage the cost and you can see what resources are creating the costs, and having sort of a start-stop automation for the development clusters since there is no reason for those clusters to be running 24 hours. Last but not the least is about security. Deployer service principles shouldn't have high rights over everything, non-production and production, so make segregation over those and their rights. And introduce access packages instead of giving access on production environments to all development team developers and also the users. But the lessons that I mentioned are not failure stories. They are also success stories, because failure is not the opposite of success. It's part of success. Let's keep that in mind. Saying that, I can shortly mention some of our future plans, and with that, I can conclude my talk. I mentioned that we have introduced service mesh and shared cluster according to our users' requirements, but we are waiting for our users to get those into use, and then we can see what's working, what's not, and we can improve on those. So these are features that are still under progress, under improvement, and they are also in our future plans. Global load balancing for stateful applications, web application firewall, and enhancing our testing strategies are also among the plans that we have for our future. Yeah, that was it. If you have any question, I would be happy to answer.
Let's give Maryam a round of applause. Yeah.